to another Cops Mentality Podcast, episode 18, baby. Happy 2025, gentlemen.
Happy New Year.
So those of you who don't know, which most of you at this point, I think have at least figured it out since we start the podcast the same way every time. Another Cops Mentality Podcast is hosted by three active law enforcement individuals who had met in the police academy, two of which are also United States military veterans. Thank you, fellas, for your service. Why do we start this podcast, fellas?
Go for it.
This is where you get to insert the crickets.
So we started this podcast because the three of us actually are essentially for a long time were each other's almost lifeline. We talked about a lot of things, opened up about mental health, about struggles, anxiety, depressions, PTSDs, having thoughts that just weren't used to having and made us a little timid at times. So what we decided to do was take that and turn it into a podcast because we wanted to normalize talking about our mental health within law enforcement, military, parenting.
Talk about it.
Stuff. So with that, we started another Cops Mentality Podcast, and it's been pretty successful so far.
It took us about a year and a half of planning, and then I would say getting the equipment and everything. We hit the ground running. We did the first episode that took us 3 hours of recording. We trimmed that down into a half an hour episode. It was painful at the beginning because we had a lot of fillers, ahs. We were thinking, obviously, the first time doing this. And then it turned into this gem that we have nowadays where I feel that we did exactly what we set out to do, which is help others feel comfortable with sharing their stories, whatever those are. And not only for law enforcement, not only for veterans, this is for everyone. We've had all the way from people having issues with their weight to actually having a doctor, a psychologist speak to us, an actual professional. All three of us are not professionals at all.
Nope.
We just share stories, things that we went through, things that other people went through. And we just wanted to normalize, like Chris said, the talk about the conversation about mental health, because we've at one point or another have all struggled with our own mental health issues. Again, if you guys have been listening, Matthias has his episode where he talks about his mental health struggle a little bit. Chris has his episode where he talks about his mental health struggle a little bit. I talk about my mental health struggle a little bit. Obviously, I feel the longer we go with this podcast, the more you guys will find out about us. I don't think that an hour is enough for us to share everything that we can possibly talk about.
Impossible.
So when we have guests, we obviously have the conversation. And if we can share stories with those guests, then you get a little bit more of our stories as well. It's been very therapeutic for all three of us, I would say. We enjoy doing exactly what we're doing. We enjoy sending this message to people because we have heard the feedback, and feedback is huge for us, especially for those of us in the military. We pride ourselves on feedback because you get your yearly reviews or every 2-year reviews, and that's where your feedback sessions comes into, hey, yeah, you're doing good. We recommend you for promotion, or hey, you haven't been doing that good and we don't recommend you for promotion. So feedback is huge in the military, and we always ask on our Instagram and on our other platforms that, give us feedback. We want to hear it. We want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. We want to hear everything that you guys have to say, and we've been listening. And this episode is going to touch on some of those topics that people have sent us on DMs or have sent us on an email or whatever other avenues they have used to reach out to us. Calls, we have text messages from people that have our numbers. So this is what this first episode of 2025 is going to encompass.
A little recap action almost.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you fellas, what is your favorite so far of the 17 episodes we've done? Really 18, then we had to redo one. So 17. But, what is, and as I ask this question, I want the listener and viewers to take a second and say, and think back, but what is your guys' favorite part that we have done in 17 episodes? And for the listener, same thing. What is something that sticks out to you in the 17 episodes that you may have listened to, or 1 or 2 or 10 or however many you listen to? What's been your favorite thing we've talked about? What do you think has made the biggest impact to the people or whoever else we're talking to?
Honestly, I think that it's been pretty incredible because we didn't even know where we wanted to go with this, right? We kind of started talking. We always just said, hey, let's just see what this can do. Where can this go? I think Angel said medicinal. It has been very therapeutic, to be able to just put all your stuff out on the table and have the amount of support that we've had, to hear other people are also not necessarily always struggling, but hey, I've dealt with this in the past, or I've gone through this and I wasn't exactly sure what it was. I think one of my favorite parts of this whole podcast was talking to your cousin. Why do I feel that way? Well, she's number one, a doctor. She's somebody who was, I think, our first professional.
Yeah.
To come on and speak from a perspective of, hey, this is what happens.
Our first mental health professional.
Mental health professional, exactly. Because we are professionals, just not a mental health.
It's not a mental health, yeah.
So I think that having a professional mental health person was pretty big, because I asked her, I said, hey, is anything that we're saying making any freaking sense?
Yeah.
Or are we just putting out like some bad information? And she said, no, unfortunately, you guys aren't going to know the proper terminologies for things, but you guys are doing a great job explaining it to the everyday listener, everyday viewer. I think that's pretty big. The fact that we were all able to speak from the heart. And I always say it to the recruits. I go, listen, we may not be matter experts on these things, but you are a matter expert in your life, right? And what you feel personally. Yeah. So I would say that that's been my favorite part, is just hearing the perspective of those who do this for a living and let us know that, hey, you're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. I think my favorite part, and obviously I may be biased with this one, is every single story that has been shared on this podcast, because I've got to learn a lot about different people, how they struggle, how they figure things out, how they cope with things, what they do to cope with things. And it's great to hear from other people that have endured or gone through something similar, or even if it wasn't something similar, at least I know there's a few episodes where the person that was the guest didn't go through something similar to me, but I still got to learn a lot from that individual, right? So not everything is going to connect with me personally, but I can, how can I say this? I can appreciate them coming here, opening up, and letting the listeners and the viewers get a little glimpse of their life and their struggle, and again, how they dealt with things. So every single episode, I have taken something away where I'm like, that's great. I would say your episode, you talked about what you did, right? Which was little video conversation with yourself, right? Let's say Matthias's episode works out, does a lot of nonprofit volunteer work. So every single episode that has, every single person that has come on this podcast that has their episode, I have taken a little bit of their story where I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's great. You had Lucy. She went into the reading, right? Carmelo, it was his family for him. Let's say Saul, right? His family for him as well, going to the gym for 2 hours when he comes out of work. Who else did we have? Brian. He does a lot of volunteer stuff for veterans, a lot of stuff for veterans. Who else did we have that I'm missing? We had John. John does a lot of volunteering work. So it seems like for most of the people that have come to our podcast, it seems like the selfless volunteering is a common theme.
Yeah.
So, and again, whether it's the working out, whether it's just spending time with your family, whether it's doing the videos, whatever it is that you utilize to cope with things and help you with things and figure things out, I have taken those little bits of their stories and just kind of made it into my own, I guess. So every episode for me has been my favorite. I don't have a specific favorite. Every episode has been my favorite because of that, because I got to learn from that individual and how they dealt with things and how they fix things, or at least how they work on fixing things, right? Because we're always a work in progress. We're not a finished product. So we're always working on getting better at being who we are. Yeah. So that's been my experience. But now I want to hear what has been your personal favorite.
I've I think in each one, similar to what you said, I've really been able to almost latch on to their story and try and not just put myself in their shoes, but how could I relate to this? And I think a lot of them you do in ways you may not understand, or you didn't understand beforehand. I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite, but the one thing that I truly appreciate is, we had brought this up before in one of the podcasts. When you're having thoughts or you're in this spot, it's almost like in your head you're in a dark tunnel with a small lantern, and you think you are alone. It's a giant tunnel. There is no light at the end of the tunnel, which makes you start to panic. It makes you feel alone. Hearing these stories and the people that have reached out, which we'll touch on in a little bit, hearing their stories, and this is something we talked about again, was you really do have somebody directly next to you with another small lantern on. And if all you do is reach your hand out, you'll touch somebody. You'll touch that person. You're going to see that there's somebody else sitting right there, and you're not alone. And so many times we read, oh, I got your 6, you're not alone. But a lot of people are like, well, what does that mean? Because nobody ever reached out, nobody talked. And, when I did our TikTok episode the other day about the female who had, committed suicide back on Christmas Eve, we have gotten a crazy amount of responses on TikTok from that. Some negative. Those people are out there in life, and you can't take take that.
There's people that live for that.
But the amount of support of "I got you 6, rest in peace" was amazing. But when you want to think about that person's shoes and that person, you wanted to say, just reach out a hand, because that's why we started this, and that's how a lot of people get through the thing is when we say you're not alone in it. And this podcast is proving. This is physical proof that what we're doing, you're not alone. You're not alone. There's the person next to you. Again, we have now with social media where we're starting to grow more and more and more, where even just to reach out of, hey, I'm feeling this way, somebody's going to get back to you, and you're going to see that there are more people next to you in this dark tunnel, and it's really not that dark. It can seem dark. And again, we've all been there. We've all talked about this to each other. But that light doesn't have to be the only light that's there, the one you're holding. You'll see that there's a lot of light. There is a lot of support there. And I think that's my favorite part about this podcast is to me, it's really shown me, and I think other people as well, because of the messages we've received, how many people, like how okay it is to feel a certain way, how you're going to be okay as long as you're doing these things. You can reach out, and do some of the things we've talked about with therapy and other things like that. But I think that's been my favorite thing is the feedback and the outreach we've gotten.
You know what I want to challenge people to utilize the fact when people tell you, I'm here for you. I want you to, this year, 2025, make it your goal to challenge people when people tell you, hey, I'm here for you. Hey, I'm here to listen. Hey, go ahead and challenge that and utilize that. If you don't think that person is there, challenge it. Go ahead and actually reach out to that person, because you said something on your episode about one individual that you ask, how are you doing? And that person's demeanor when you said it completely changed. Like, wow, I never had anybody actually say it and care. So when somebody says how you're doing, or ask you how you're doing, challenge that. I want every listener to challenge every single individual that tells you how are you, or how are you feeling? How can I help you? Challenge it, utilize it, see if that individual is actually there. And I feel, obviously, my opinion, I feel that what you will find out this year, if you do challenge those people, is that there are more people that are there for you than you're actually thinking that are there for you. People will genuinely be there for you if you challenge them or accept the challenge that, hey, how are you? Well, let me talk to you about what I'm going through. And you will be surprised in a good way to see how many people will actually sit there and listen to what you have to say. And obviously, we're here to listen as well. So if anybody ever needs to actually need somebody to listen to them, challenge us. I dare you to challenge us. I dare you to reach out to us. See if we don't respond. See if we're not here to listen. I want people to challenge people to say that they're here for them. Challenge that. 2025 is the year that people should open up and start challenging people. You're here for me? Here's what I got. Let's see what's coming out of that.
Yeah. It's when you, like, a lot of people are like, yo, how you doing, man? You doing good? Yeah, you're good? that's the typical how you doing. But when you sit down, you're like, yo, how you doing? What's going on? You even when Tia, it's like we all know each other. You can see the change, because you can see their eyes. You can see the change in the mindset of, well, what do you mean? And a lot of people will be not passive aggressive, but defensive. No, nothing other. But you can see when you're talking to that person that maybe, and it may be something small, but there's something there. And I know one thing I've started is you guys know is every time I stop calling, I hear before I have the phone, I say to all my boys, all right, love you. And I want, if you don't say it back, I'll call you right back. I did it to my boy the other day. I'm like, yo, I said I love you. And he's like, yo, I love you too. I'm like, all right, cool, bro.
All right, bye.
But the effect that has to the company that we're talking about potentially doing some apparel stuff with us, Hug Your Bros, that's how their story started, right? Was just guys being like, yo, giving each other a hug. And that's the thing is, showing the people you love about, and it doesn't have to be just people you love, but showing. I say that because it's the easiest one, but showing those people like you're there. And again, that's even that. Yo, I love you, bro. Like that's the easiest in the quick. And somebody feels that. They're like,
it's an emotional maturity thing, though, because one thing that I'd like to see myself improve this year is diving more into the Bible. Right? I think everybody has their own platform, their own foundation that makes them who they are. For me, it's digging into the Bible, because there are so many times that you look for advice or you look for a way out and you can't really find it. And if you can't relate, if you can't compare those feelings with somebody who's been there or done that, then you're going to start looking at Google, right? Everybody Googles all their symptoms all the time.
And that just means you have cancer.
That's what it comes out. Everything is cancer.
Google, why do I have this thought? You have cancer.
You're about to get a limb amputated.
I can't afford to lose anything else, so let's not amputate. But I just sent you guys a group text message the other day, right? And I said, hey, do me a favor, dig into Job 13, 14, 15 in the Bible. And the reason why I did that is because I started this whole 365 a day, a single time a day that you follow a script of reading the entire Bible, and I always preach the Bible, this and that. And I was embarrassed to say that sometimes I am only looking at the Bible for something that's going to help me. But how can I be this Christian that I want to be and help other people with scripture when I can only advise people on the comments, the quotes, the verses that I know? So I was forced to read Job, and it was talking about the story of how, he was perfect. Everything was great. His family was good. The crops were great. And all of a sudden, Satan came out of nowhere and challenged God. And he goes, the only reason why this guy is, on you and attached to you and doing great is because you've never given him any challenges. He goes, I guarantee you this guy is solid. He's got my back. He's 100%. And then he's like, all right, let me try him. Let me test him. And so there the story starts talking about how, fire comes from the sky, which I think would be related to lightning, and wipe out his all his flocks and all his agriculture. And then essentially like the roof gets collapsed and it kills his children. And now he's like, God, just test me. You gave it to me so you could take it away. And he goes deep into this. And then the quote that I sent you guys, the verse that I sent you guys had everything to do with their friends, giving them bad advice, saying you must have done something wrong, which is why you're being penalized, right? Why God is penalizing you. And I just generally don't feel like God punishes us. I think that he does things to bring us closer to him, So when I started reading about Job, it said that sometimes when people are grieving, when people are going through the things that we go through, the struggles that we go through, I think it has so much to do with Hug Your Bros. I love you, bro. Anything we want to do is because we're scared that we can't comfort somebody who has this heavy load, right? And in the Bible, it says you don't have to explain anything. You don't have to talk about anything. You don't have to give them an explanation or look for an explanation. It says sit with it, right? Sit with him. And if you listen to any podcasts that have, legit doctors and stuff, they say one of the biggest medicines or solutions.
Illegitimate doctors.
Illegitimate people. Not illegitimate doctors, just people like us talking from personal life.
There's a few times where I want to jump in. My bad.
No, please do. Hey, we'll talk about that in a minute. So it says sit with them, right? Sit with their grief. And you know what the problem is that we rush things. How are you, bro? I'm good, thanks. Because it's almost like, hey, how you doing? Good. How are you? Good. All right. And you go your separate way.
Response.
It's an auto response.
It's like when your email, when you're going away, right? And you set up your email that somebody sends you an email. It's like,
I'm not here. I'll be back.
That's exactly what I'm good, and that's what I'm saying. Challenge people. Are you actually good? Like, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Like Matthias was saying, that people go to, and I'm going to say generalize. I'm going to say people go to Starbucks. I'm doing better already this year.
But did you mean to say white people?
I just said people.
We do like
I'm already doing
we do
better.
like
2025. You
Right.
leave. Let's start off fresh.
Listen, I walked in this house. I'm not the one that had Starbucks on the counter, bro. I'm just saying, just want to point that
That
out.
was one of my daughters. That was one of my daughters. So I'm just saying, challenge people this year. Do dig and find out if that person is actually going to be there. Because when you send us that Bible verse, and I'm going to probably touch on something that you don't want to get touched, not inappropriately. Not inappropriately.
Do we need to break
I'll
out the doll?
accept it.
Do we need to break out the doll?
I'm open.
But you were going through something that week. You said something about it. And our response to your inquiry was, I guess, I don't know what you expected or what you didn't expect, however you took it. But you said, hey, thank you for not being like, who's the guy?
Job's friend.
Job's friend.
Friends,
And then
two
you
friends.
said friends. And then you said, please read this.
Yeah.
Right? And when I read it, it was like his friends were a-holes.
Yeah.
And yes, we are a-holes by all means.
Completely.
Right?
Purposely.
Completely. Exactly.
Full of.
But when it comes to reality, and when one of us is going through something, and I said it to you, I said, we all have jokes. Everybody knows I joke around a lot because that's how I cope. I make light of everything. It doesn't matter how bad it is.
Yeah.
You guys know I joke around about everything. So I did tell you that I wanted to joke on it, but then I know how you were feeling. And the fact that you shared it with us, I felt this is not the moment to joke around.
Time and
right?
place.
So I went and took it serious as it was. And I commented like, hey, bud, I've felt like this before. I've shared that before with you. You said something similar along those lines. It's okay to feel that way. But I could have made a joke at that point. And that could have been a point where you're like, bro, that's not the time or place right
and it's
now.
going to push him away to try and reach out later. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've all had to work on that.
But look at how good it was, the fact that we didn't joke around.
No, 100%.
Then you sent that Bible verse that resonated so much with you we had zero idea about that Bible verse.
Yep.
We literally took something that you said and we told you how we felt and told you how to kind of help out a little bit, right? And you said, hey, look at this Bible verse. And I thank you guys for not being like his friends.
Yep.
And that when I read it, I was like, Jesus Christ, like.
But why do you think?
I mean, I
so
could've been
so why do you
I
think?
could have been that guy.
You could
very
have been.
easily.
But the problem was because we are a little bit more intertwined and connected because of our experiences in the police academy and our families and our wives and our kids. We do kind of already know when the person's not doing good or not feeling right or whatever, right? But what about that stranger? The stranger that doesn't know how to approach, how to sit, how to listen. I think that's a lot of us. I myself am guilty of that, which, again, we've talked about that today, and I want to express that, in the podcast at some point. But sometimes, again, just sitting and listening is so much more powerful, even if the person's not talking, just sitting there and grieving with them and knowing that might be reciprocated to you is a lot more powerful than just, like you said, making a joke or trying to change the subject because that person's feelings need to feel legitimized.
Well, you
right?
got to validate. You
Validate, and you guys
this.
did a great job because I was not expecting that. What I said, all bullshit aside. I did say all bullshit aside, and there were no jokes. And I think I was more surprised at the fact that there were
didn't joke around.
that you didn't joke around. And it was good. It was good because it was a conversation, it was flowing. And then Chris almost because I almost thought Chris was going to ignore what I said. I don't know if you noticed that. It was like 5 messages later that you gave me a response to that because you were talking about something else. And then I just kind of threw that out there. And I said, hey, do you guys ever feel like at times you're sitting at home and you're just like low energy, not motivated, don't want to go to the gym, and you guys are saying, hey, the holidays are tough, the weather makes it difficult. Yes, I've been there. Sometimes I just sit with it. And there was a lot of reasons why you may feel that way. And you could have been like, hey, stop fucking around, go back to the gym, or, don't let it bother you. That's really poor advice. Mm-hmm. When somebody's telling you they feel a certain way, it is not our job to make that pain go away. Is just to be there with them. It's just to listen. So I think that's what I would like to say is a solid ground for what Angel said. Hey, he challenges you. I challenge you. You challenge whoever. We challenge each other. Start focusing on being there for somebody by just sitting with them and seeing what happens. Maybe they communicate. Maybe this person's never verbalized what they were really feeling. They just maybe even had the strength or the acknowledgement to go, I never really told you what I'm going through. Like, this is it. They might do that. They might do that. So I think that's going to be powerful.
I think don't just sitting in the same room. I mean, that's a presence in its own. If you're just with somebody, because over time, what that's going to do is when they're alone, they're going to remember that time. Though, again, you could say nothing, but somebody sitting in this chair, which I think this chair today is designated for the law enforcement, any individual that lost their life to the battle in 2024.
So right? take the wood off.
I think that's a fair thing to do. Because again, you could sit there with somebody in plain silence, and that person's going to remember that the next time that they're sitting by themselves, maybe contemplating something. And it's just going to be the last time I decided that somebody was sat there, and they just sat there. Yeah. But they're going to remember that, and it's going to take their mind off of what they're going through. When you said those verses, one of the things I remember, when I am on social media, I'm like, there you go. Is when you, and I'm not, you guys know I'm not like heavily religious, but I'm religious. I believe in God, I believe in the Bible. I think there's a lot of things in verses that do relate to us in every walk of life. And I don't think it's a coincidence. There's no way that any of that, something that's that old, that's been around for that long, is a coincidence to today. That's, in my opinion, not how that works. When you pray for patience, God gives you, I forget what the saying is, he gives you things like annoyance or whatever else, because you have to learn how to be patient. When you pray for strength, right, he gives you things to hold or whatever else, you have to learn how to be strong. Basically, anytime you pray for something, God is going to hand you the opposite, because he's not just going to give it to you. You have to learn.
You have to earn it.
Right, you have to learn. You have to earn it. That's always something that sticks out with me, because when I'm like, oh, fucking help me be patient with these kids, I'm like, well, that's exactly what's happening. I'm learning how to be patient with my children or with my job or my wife or myself. One of the things, kind of taking that, I think a lot of people, I was looking at things. I remember we talked about doing a spirituality episode very early on. I think it was like episode 4 or 5. And we were kind of,
we did.
Well, we just
no, we didn't do the episode, but we did speak about it. The episode that we kind of did for it, we had to scrap it because of sound issues. But I don't think that was the right episode for that specific topic. And,
everything happens for a reason. I think that may be why. And I think even now it's more applicable to touch on. But, a lot of people look at spirituality and religion and they're like, oh, they're the same thing. They're not. The religion is like a following-based system. Like I follow Christianity, I go to church, this, that, the third. Spirituality is believing in like a higher being, but maybe not something specific, but yes, there is something there. And there's research out there, and I wish I had my notepad on me, because I wrote down, I spent hours. So I wrote down notes, statistics.
You wrote down statistics?
Statistics.
God damn.
The amount,
you put some work into it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
In the Lord's name in vain.
The mental health.
I'm not perfect. I said we're always work in progress.
The mental health impact that religion and spirituality in general have on a person's well-being is insurmountable. And it's when we start to lose.
What was the word?
Insurmountable.
Wow.
We're just starting 2025, bro. I got Webster Dictionary up here.
I'll look it up.
Please.
But I think there's a lot of people out there that when they hear this podcast, well, it's fucking boring because you're talking about religion. I think that those are the people where you really should sit down and just ask yourself what you want to believe in and how that functions you, how that makes you go about life. Because I think you see, like, when you do grab onto something, again, spirituality is just the faith of something else. Like, there's something there. It can change your perspective with a lot of things.
Insurmountable. Too great to be overcome. An insurmountable person.
2025.
God, this guy's on it.
I will tell you.
I need a new vocabulary.
You keep using these big words, brother, man. I'm going to think you're offending me because I don't understand what you're saying. It's going to be a problem.
English is on my face.
You know what I'm saying? It's going to be a problem. I'm going to start saying shit in Spanish, and you're going to be looking at me like, what are you saying? Exactly how I feel.
Come on,
Okay. So one thing I kind of wanted to jump into, we talked about having this seat for all the individuals that lost their life in 2024 on the job or not, but not primarily, but we focus a little more on the job because that's what we are and how we started this. We've touched on in a few episodes, the peer counseling stuff on the job, how we can help these people. And in some of the TikTok messages that we've received and comments, people bring up, they're like, oh, well, it's the job. And I know some people have asked us on our Instagram, can you talk about bad leadership? Can you talk about not being able to approach your command staff? And I kind of wanted to touch on that because I think not all the time, but sometimes this is relatable, because when you're on the job and you don't feel like you can go that route where you can't talk to your supervisor, maybe you don't have somebody with you that's on the job, then there's nobody off the job. Because remember, a lot of cops, that is their identity. Because I'm a cop. There is nobody over here. It's just we're cops. Nobody else exists.
And I think we touched on that on a few episodes,
yes,
where when the job becomes your identity, that's when people start getting depression when they retire. Or let's say something happens on the job, you get suspended, you get reprimanded, and now you feel like the job doesn't have your back. So a lot of people get into something and then they figure out that the job is not supporting them as they feel they should.
Yep.
And because that became your identity, now you have that identity issue, which is exactly what's going to happen, right? And when Brian was here, he touched on leadership a little bit. And yes, a good leader and a bad leader can make it or break it for someone. I personally have learned more from bad leaders than I have from good leaders, in the sense that I look at a bad leader and I'm like, that's a great example of how I don't want to be when I become a leader. And you don't necessarily have to have, for those of you that think that to be a leader, you need to have stripes on your chevrons on your shoulders, or little butter bars on your collar. No, that's wrong. Actually, you don't need to have any of that to be a leader. And I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. If that's what you think leadership is, then you're wrong. And please, if
I 100% agree. I agree.
If I'm off, tell me. You can be a leader without having any official title from your job, right? You can help guide people. You can help teach people how to do the job the right way. That's a leadership. That's leadership to me. Like a boss with chevrons on his shoulders or wherever it's placed, that's a boss. I don't necessarily see that as a leader. That's a boss. You could be a leader as a police officer, which is the lowest title, right? So police officer is the lowest title on our job.
Yeah.
Not saying that they're the least of anything. That's just the title where we start. That's the starting point. And if you never make it to a sergeant and you never make it to a lieutenant, doesn't mean you weren't a good leader. You could have been a great leader, and you probably were a great leader, and you decided not to go the boss route.
Yep.
So you don't necessarily have to have an official title to be a leader. Just be there for your people. Right? You don't have to officially have people. Like I work in a squad and I work in a zone, and I like to think that I'm an okay leader in the sense that if you need me, I'm there. Whether you need me to talk, whether you need me to listen, whether you just need me to help back you on something, I'm there. That's a good leadership trait. Be there for your people, right? Guide them in the right direction. Point them in the right direction. You don't have to have the official title.
The leadership's tough, because you see so much good and bad of it. And there's been so many times where I see, like Angel said, a boss that makes me want to be a boss. And then I remind myself that, hey, unfortunately, there's steps that you have to take to being a boss, and you can't blame anybody else but yourself for not being a boss. You are afforded the opportunity on our job to become a boss, right? So when you can read between the lines that if you're a boss and you're a shitty person and you're not doing anything to be a leader, then you can't call yourself a leader. You have to call yourself a boss.
And you're going to be a shitty boss.
And you're going to be a shitty
take your the position or the title with you. You're not a leader. You're a boss.
You're a boss. That's it. Simple as that. And I think that we get frustrated. I know myself. I can speak for myself. I've gotten very frustrated with bosses because I'm like, you suck. You're a shit boss. And because you took an exam and you got a good score on the exam and I'm not a very good test taker, you think you're over me. But the problem is it's not on them. It's on me because I'm afforded the opportunity to take that test and I need to do a better job so I can also be promoted. And then I can set the example that I want or I have envisioned for somebody to get. So I think that when people like Angel, myself, you've been in a position of leadership, can obtain that boss role, and then also with experience and who you are as a person, have the attachment of leadership to it. That's what creates a good boss, is the leadership. Now, because you took a test, that has everything and anything to do with just you. Right. You as an individual or boss, or in the military, you can be promoted based on your merit, time and attendance, pros and cons. It may be a little bit skewed too, because if you're a supervisor, you can also kind of put in the good word for somebody and they could move up.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's kind of like the issue with meritorious promotions.
It's not what you know.
It's who you know, right? So that could be an issue. So which
is everywhere.
That's everywhere,
and that's almost every company known to mankind. Is how
so
that works.
To me, I think we need to stop having so many expectations of a boss being a good leader and just understanding that's the hierarchy, right? That's the chain of command. It's going to branch out. Now, I believe personally, Matias says to be a good leader, it comes with experience, right? Nobody is just born a sergeant or a lieutenant. Leaders are made. It takes life experience. It takes, your upbringing. It takes a bunch of elements to make somebody go, hey, I want to follow that guy. Right. There's people in the military and the police department. I'd be like, hey, what window do you want me to jump out of? Yeah, yeah. And there's bosses who I'd be like, fuck you, man. Fire me. I don't want to work here anymore either.
I actually had,
here we go.
No shit. No shit. I actually had somebody last night that said to me, I'll call him after the episode, said to me, boy, whenever you get promoted, I want to go where you go. Bring me with you.
That's awesome.
And again, I'm not a boss.
Right.
Right.
But you're a leader, though.
But for somebody to say that to me,
that's
a Marine. I'm Marine at that.
Oh man. Does that guy's name start with a D?
No, it doesn't. No, it does not. Wow. I'll tell you the name later.
All right.
But that person looked at me with the supervisor in the room because we were having the conversation about leadership last night because I love talking about leadership. Around leadership, just to kind of let them know, like, maybe what you perceive as a good boss, it's not a good boss. Right. And there's nothing on the rule book that says if I have a shitty boss, that I cannot reach out to a good boss for advice. Yep. Right? Like, if I don't think that my boss is a good boss, I can easily reach out to another boss that I think is a great boss and be like, hey, boss, this is what I'm going through. This is what I've been experiencing. Do you have any pointers? Is there anything I could do better? So when that person said that to me last night, super serious, said it to me. You know how that makes me feel as a person, as a human being, that somebody says to me, when you get promoted, I want to come wherever you go.
That's awesome.
Because that boss that was in the room at that moment, that's exactly what I was telling that boss. I go, whenever you get promoted to lieutenant and I get promoted to sergeant, bring me with you because I want to go where you're going. And that PO, just like me, another police officer, no bigger title, just a police officer just like me, says, I want to go wherever you go.
That's cool.
That made me feel great.
Awesome.
I'm not a boss.
No, but you're a natural born leader though. And you know that.
And that's why we're saying you don't have to have the official title to be a leader.
And that's one of the things, going back to the original question, my one piece of advice would be to the people that deal with this, like, I can't say something to this boss. This was like, some departments are very small where you can't.
You only have that.
You have to figure out and find a way. And this is where we've talked about perspective a lot, is how to make the situation work for you. Listen, in our line of work, you don't jump chain of command. But if it's something serious, listen, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But that may come with lashings, and you're going to have to take your lashings. I've said this to other people that are outside of law enforcement realm. We've had people move up, and they, because of whatever it may be, that person is friends with the new boss, so the boss gave him a title jump. So now somebody that was their counterpart is above them, or somebody that, we said before, it was a good test taker that took it and now they're a boss. You can't change that. You can't change that person's there now. But you also can't let that take away from your everyday. Because if you show up and you're letting that control you at work, You're letting it control you at home. And that person's not going anywhere. So let's say they're in that position for 4 years. You're going to spend 4 years of your life so consumed in this. It's rude. You're not getting that 4 years back. But you still have a great job. You still have the opportunity. So go out and be a leader. Find a way that you can change your path. Because right now you're just looking at the new obstacle and saying, well, fuck that obstacle. I don't want anything to do with it. Okay, we got a brick wall in front of you now. Well, that wasn't there yesterday. Okay, well, you can sit there, piss and moan about it for 5 fucking minutes, but you got to move on. It's when and that's, again, I think we've talked about that, the 5-minute rule that we deal with. Be mad about it for 5 minutes. Again, it doesn't mean literally start a timer for 5 minutes. Yeah. Be mad for 5 minutes. You got to move on. What's my new route? What's my direction? What am I going to do? And that would be the one thing I tell people is, so you don't like the leadership that's there. So be a leader.
That's it.
How are you now going to change the trajectory of, because in those small departments, you can make a giant impact and you can be a leader that people now want to follow. And that can change the whole directory of your department. In a bigger department, you can still have almost the same exact thing, because bigger department, you can make bigger changes down the road and you're going to have more and more people that will start to follow because you're leading, right? It's almost like an ant march. You're leading, and now you have 2 ants behind you. Well, behind those 2 ants, because they're doing what you do, are another 3-4 ants. Now all of a sudden you've got 17, 18 ants walking behind you. You're like, oh shit, I've never even knew those people. Well, that's because of the leadership you chose to make versus sitting there going, well, I don't like my boss, so fuck this job.
How many times have you seen your peers come to you for advice? That shows your leadership.
Yeah.
Because they can get advice from a supervisor,
right?
right?
I still get it on jobs.
You have peers that come to you, so they feel confident enough that you'll walk them through the right path when they come for advice to you. That's the leadership.
I asked this
trait.
like not too long ago in a podcast. I said, who's raising our children? Who's raising our children?
Realistically, I mean,
realistically,
they're home. The school and other kids that are around them, and
social media influences. Right, our kids are on social media all day long. So yes, there may be times where at home they know what they're doing, they know who's in charge, they know who to respect. Home. But when they're not home, people will be like, "Oh, there's no cursing in my house." I don't think your kids are going to be cursing because you don't curse in your house. I think kids will start cursing because of the people that are doing it outside of your house, their friends, whoever. So to touch on what Angel said, about leadership, it says it everywhere, even in the Bible. It says, depending on who it is that is saying the information is the way that it's delivered from the person delivering the information. Mm-hmm. If it's Angel, which he had a great compliment last night, right? Somebody said, hey, I'll follow you anywhere. Clearly it's because he said or done things that has made this person feel vulnerable, comfortable, accepted, that I'm like, hey man, I'll follow you, right? Because I had a supervisor who's now a lieutenant, who was a sergeant. He was also a sergeant major in the Marine Corps, so maybe I'm a little biased. But the dude would come up to my calls and be like, hey, babe, everything good? Yo, Maddie, you good? You need anything? I'm like, no, I'm good, boss. Okay, I'll see you later.
Yeah, I heard it.
I meant to say boss.
He called you babe.
I heard it.
And babe came out.
I heard it.
I was trying not to say their name.
God damn it. I was trying to ignore it. It's just my face did not let it slide. I'm sorry.
Rewind.
I'm sorry.
He would come to the call.
Hey, babe, you okay? You need help?
Hey, baby.
Whoa.
We won't say his name.
That's some Marine stuff right there.
It is. We won't say his name. All right. But he'd be like, you need anything? No, boss. You're all right. Good. Thanks. Come see me when you're done. We'll chit chat. Yeah. And you would go get your book scratched. What do you need? How's everything going? How's the family? Yada, yada, yada. Then I leave midnights and he gets promoted to lieutenant. And every time I see him, the Marine Corps birthday, like outings, his niece just graduated not too long ago. He came up, took some pictures, like whatever. He was always like, hey, how's work? How you doing? Are you studying for the sergeant exam? What are you doing with your career? That just asking about things even outside of work. Yeah. It was like, damn, like you make me feel like you care.
Right.
Make me feel like you understand that there's more than to being a fucking cop. Your mental health depends on how people are treating you around you. So I can kind of understand why that person would say that to Angel is because of the example that they set. When you tell me because I fucking told you to do so, and all you did with less time than me to get promoted is take a fucking test, kiss my ass. I will always respect you.
Kiss my ass. Kiss his ass.
You will respect the rank.
I will respect the rank.
Right.
But you take that fucking shirt off and you're just like the rest of us. And then it's like you wonder why people have that whole identity crisis when all you are is a sergeant or a lieutenant or a captain of a military or police organization. Because when you retire, you're fucking nobody. You know, maybe your family loves you, whatever, but to the police department, you're just the person who did the job, and you did a good job because you got promoted and whatever else you did, and you're going on your way. For what I would like to see in myself is to apply what I need to apply to get promoted, to become a boss, and then use my life skills and the things that I've learned to be a good leader, right? Not to do good on the test so I can tell everybody else to fuck off. No, I would like to do that so that I can set the example, because if this was told me by, I'll say Aaron, Slater from Relentless Defender. He said, Matt, if you don't ever take the exam, then you can never tell somebody that this system is flawed. Because I used to say, oh, it's fucked up. You got to take a test. And if you don't take the test and you don't get the sergeant, he goes, if you don't take that exam, later down the road, if somebody goes, hey, why weren't you promoted?
I wouldn't say you can't tell the system. You can't tell anybody that the system is flawed. What you cannot do is complain about bad bosses, because you could become a boss and be a good boss.
Which is what he was saying. He was saying if you don't take that exam and you don't find out what it's really all about,
right?
Then you can't really say the system is broken. There's bad bosses.
Right.
You had every opportunity to study and become a good. To become a boss.
Yeah.
Who even says you're going to be a good boss? Maybe you get there and you have the stretch and you turn into an asshole like half the people I've seen.
Well, and that's all about influence. If you're a person that is easily influenced, now you become a sergeant and you have a lieutenant that's a bad lieutenant, and you start taking those trades like the bad lieutenant, and you become a bad boss because you're easily influenced. You have to have your personality very well defined when you're on any job. If you want to be a good leader, you can't get easily influenced.
Yeah. I'm just going to say this because maybe this is somebody's first time listening to the podcast. Angel was a first sergeant. It's not like he's just saying this is a low grade airman or whatever. He was in a leadership position. I can't say I've been in a boss leadership position. I think I'm a pretty good leader. I've been told that the same thing that, hey, you could do A, B, and C, not even in the police world, just in different things.
Well, you see that just by your general outreach and perception from the population anyway. One of the things we've, as talked about when we started this podcast was the ability for outreach, because of how many people look up to you, how many people's lives you have touched, not just because of your story, but how you present yourself, the advice you give them.
And you're always there for people.
Roads that you give people, like, hey, this is an avenue you can take. This is what you can try. So I would agree. I think, the two of you, what you bring to the table for a lot of people is, and I hope off this next text, especially you guys get to that position, because I think your department will only benefit from the two of you being in a boss and leadership position. But one of the things, again, is you don't necessarily have to be a boss, again, to be a leader. And you guys are still proving that from what you're doing, right? We have recruits coming from you guys who are talking about you in and out, the perception you left on them, how you carried yourself in the academy, the way you made them think to do this job versus this is just a job. And then again, you having a PO, your counterpart saying, hey, where you go, I'm going to follow. That's something, again, like I would like the listener, hopefully at this point, maybe to press pause and go, what am I doing for the people around me? Not for them, but how am I leading them, and how am I leading my own life? Because if you're sitting there going, well, I'm not leading my own life, well, that may be part of the issue as well. If you're not taking the steps to not just better yourself, but say, okay, where am I going? You can stay a PO, you can stay a salesman,
100%.
Communications, whatever you want.
And you can be a great leader in those positions.
What are you doing in that job, and how are you making it work for you? I feel like a lot of people, when they go through these things and they're down, who may be sitting in this chair, or maybe struggling sometimes, is they lose that ability to not call themselves out, but ask themselves, okay, what direction am I walking? What do I want to do? What do I want to remember myself as? Because they just kind of go through the daily motions. And when you do that, when you lose that sense of self, that sense of not purpose, but of like a direction, so to speak. And again, the direction could be, well, I want to do this. Okay, how am I going to do this better tomorrow? And when you start to change that mindset of how can I do this better tomorrow? How can I go and do this? And it may be, well, who's that benefiting? Well, you. It's just benefiting you. That's the only person that needs to benefit. If it benefits everybody else, fucking cool. You helped other people. what direction are you walking in? Because again, when you'll realize you start to become a leader, not only does it feel great, but you'll notice yourself in the morning as you get up and you're like, I have done a lot. I am doing the right things. I am. And it makes those harder days, at least in my opinion, a little bit easier seeing the changes you've made in yourself or the changes you made around in the people around you.
Speaking of changing yourself, if you guys don't mind that we transition.
Shifting gears.
Third gear. I wanted to bring up something that we discussed. Angel and I were discussing this before you got back from going to drop off your kid.
Yeah, we tried doing a podcast.
We tried doing a podcast with your son. It just was not working.
He made a few guest appearances.
love you, bud, but it didn't work.
It's something that I think we're doing to each other. A good service that we're doing for each other is helping each other grow. Right. One thing that Angel had said to me is that, we're receiving good feedback, whether it's positive, negative, productive, counterproductive, whatever it is, we'll take it. Right. I have to be better. I know I have to get better at accepting and embracing some of that negative feedback. Something that we've talked about with each other's lives and what affects us, maybe anxiety, depression, PTSD, weight, whatever. I never had any of those things. For me, it was always, you talk too fucking much. Now, you can't tell me that because I already know this, right? We could talk about this, right? We were saying that you talk too much. That was something I've heard since I was a young kid. Now, I heard it from my parents. I heard it from my friends. I heard it in the Marine Corps.
Heard it in the academy.
I heard it in the academy.
Matt's hand would go up and we'd go, fuck it. Hey, Matt, just stop.
Got a lot of questions.
It's like when you're about to go
we
home.
Were wondering.
No, it wasn't.
We're about to go home. And they're like, anybody got a question?
That was not me.
It's like, bro,
the class was wondering.
The class was wondering. It was never 45 minutes prior because we know who's going to keep us there past 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock.
Notorious.
All I'm saying is this, is that is one of my insecurities is hearing people give feedback on you talk too much. Look, I understand it. It is part of my personality. It is a little bit a part of my upbringing. Growing up in the South, and I realized it took a little time. Growing up in the South, people are friendly. You go to the grocery store, you open up a door for somebody, and you end up having a 25-minute conversation about the sun and the traffic and the people.
In New York, it's like, fuck off.
In New York, it's like, don't fucking hold the door open for me. Don't say anything. Don't look at me. Don't whatever, right? And when you have a good relationship with your friends, that feedback of like, hey, you talk too much or whatever, may be good criticism because you can go, all right, in what way? Angel and I were having this conversation when you weren't here where he said, you can't let it bother you, okay, because A, B, and C. And I go, well, the reason why it bothers me is because A, B, and C. And I need to address those things on how to help that. And I was like, somebody told you I talk too much on a podcast? How fucking ridiculous is that? That's the point of the fucking podcast, is to talk. And I know that we're doing a little bit of disservice, which is something that we're obviously going to be working on, all three of us, and said the same thing.
New year, new me.
New year, new me. New year, same bullshit, right?
New year, same me.
The person that's sitting in that chair is essentially the reason why this podcast is going to continue to grow. I think that we are pretty outgoing enough that we can keep a conversation going. Yeah. I don't know how long people will want to listen to the podcast.
Clearly.
But by bringing on that extra person, that guest to talk, it's only fair that we let them freaking talk. And I know myself, I'm not going to talk for you guys. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but speaking to myself, I just get excited because I want to be able to relate to that person. I want to be able to say, hey, I know what you're feeling. I know what you went through.
We're almost a viewer in the same sense of the viewer listener is, but ours is just in real time.
It's hard.
It's so crazy, right? Because, and you know this or you may not know this, you are a talker. I am a talker.
I know this.
I'm a talker. When you did your podcast and we went to Yonkers and I was sitting there behind the scenes listening to him talking, I was like this.
I want to talk.
Put me in, coach. I want to talk. Put me in. I had a lot to say about the podcast or about the conversation. I had a lot of input. And I'm in the background, so I understand where you're coming from right now. We're saying where you're saying we're a viewer, we're a listener. So I want to jump in and I want to say things on his podcast that day when we were in Yonkers. I'm in the background. I'm like, put me in. Put me in.
I did say, Angel, you got to say something.
I got something.
And Angel starts talking in the background. I'm sure Angel's in the background somebody give that man a mic.
So yes, when it comes down to like excitement and sharing stories, I understand. You want to sympathize, you want to empathize, you want to share your story, you kind of want to connect with that individual. That's understandable. I do it too. I'm here and somebody's talking and they come up with something and I cut them off, maybe at a point where they're just getting their point across, or they're at a good point where they're going to expand on their topic. And I jump in and I share a little bit of my story, and that just kind of derails them.
Right.
Like now they're like, what was I saying before? Right? So when I tell you that some of the feedback is that you talk a lot and you take, let's say, over an episode, or maybe I talk a lot and I jump in at the wrong times and I make a joke at the wrong time or whatever, you cannot yes, thank you for the feedback. I actually appreciate it, whether good or bad.
As do I.
It doesn't affect me, good or bad, in the sense that I won't take it personal because it's part of growing and we're looking for growth, right? We're new to the podcast stuff. I think we're doing a phenomenal job. And whether you have good feedback, negative feedback, the end result is going to be the same. You're just going to make us better. So I will not take it personally. You can say whatever you want and I will listen. If it's good or bad feedback where I can actually utilize it in a positive way, I will take it. If you're just being an asshole to be an asshole, then fuck off.
Goodbye.
It's that simple. Yeah.
So I think one of the things the listeners can take from that, right, and give to themselves, it's a two-part. A lot of people, not that they can't take criticism. Nobody likes really criticism, right? Nobody likes to be told, I don't like this part about you, something you did, something you do. A lot of people are like, well, fuck you then. Don't listen. Don't do it. The point is, you have to be able to look at it and go, grit your teeth and say, okay, why are they saying this? Are they right? Are they wrong? Should I make a change? Should I not make a change? It can't just be, well, fuck them, I'm not going to make a change.
Yeah.
Because that criticism may actually be something that turns around to only improve you in the long run anyways.
Yeah.
The other one is really it's going to end up being pretty much the same thing. This is really just being able to take that criticism and take it in stride. Because again, like that's something we're doing. We want, we're telling you because you're listening to the podcast. We want you to know that we're listening to you.
Right.
But B is again, that's relatable to everybody. Is not everything you do is perfect. Not everything you do is great. Not everything you do is going to make everyone happy. But you're going to have to look at it and say, well, why does it affect me that doesn't make them happy? Is that something that's me that I can work on? Or if it doesn't make them happy, okay, if that's my goal, then like again, if our goal is to make the viewers want to keep listening. Okay, well, what changes do we have to make? And that self-reflection, again, even in times where things are hard, your anxiety, depression, whatever else, that self-reflection of, well, why am I feeling this way? Why am I having these thoughts? Is it normal? Taking that self-reflection and then expanding on it is important.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think we've touched on a lot of topics, and what we want to just kind of put on the table is what our plan is, for the upcoming year. What I would like to see is us get a sponsor. Yeah. I'd like to see us get a sponsor so we can
give us money, please. We need money.
We broke.
We're broke. And now money to put in our bank accounts, money to make the podcast better, better equipment and stuff of that nature.
Yeah.
Somebody has asked me that, and I'm like, do you realize the amount of money we would have to make this an everyday job for the three of us? There's three of us. It's not one person to be like, all right, well, that one guy's got to get paid. There's three of us.
Yeah,
we're not looking for that kind of money.
We're not looking to make money off the
But that's my point.
We're looking to upgrade, let's say, the computer, get another camera so we can have different angles. There's a few things we want to donate. Obviously, Matias has a nonprofit. I want to be able to also engage with that nonprofit and help the cause of the nonprofit. For those of you that don't know, Matias, talk a little bit about your nonprofit, and what it entails, right?
Yeah, I think it all started working together. Semper United, Another Cause Mentality. We were all kind of working at the same time to start something, do anything, and put our money where our mouth is, so to speak. We wanted to help veterans. We wanted to help first responders. The nonprofit was designed to put veterans, first responders back into the gym, back into jiu-jitsu, doing something almost essentially as a buddy program to motivate each other, to
Right.
talk about these things that we talked about, because we didn't just talk about them in a go, oh, let's talk about a podcast so we can talk about our problems. We've been discussing our problems through gym time, through jujitsu, through family time, and the hardest times are
Fridays.
always when what's that?
Pizza Fridays.
Yeah, Pizza Fridays. You know, it was Pizza Sunday.
Pizza Sunday.
PP Fridays.
PBF today.
PBF.
Podcast and Pizza Fridays.
I think it's important, you know, and there's sometimes in a moment when you have everything you wanted to accomplish and you're like, why am I even doing this? You know, but then you forget like how you felt that day where you didn't necessarily have that somebody to listen to or sit with or whatever. So this podcast is not necessarily just for us to chat. This makes me feel good. You know, it makes me feel good to talk to you guys, to hear your stories, to see how comfortable you're willing to get with the public, you know,
To be vulnerable.
to be vulnerable. You know, I think that's the medicine right there, is vulnerability, to go, okay, that's what that means, is you're not alone. That's what that means. It's okay not to be okay. Because you hear these sayings and you're like, what the fuck's that even mean?
I got your 6.
You know, I got your 6.
Yeah.
but
like,
do you though?
Right.
what do those things mean? You know, and then when you start to put a translation, a definition behind them, you're not alone doesn't mean you're, you know, not alone as in physically
By yourself.
by yourself.
Yeah.
You're not alone means to me, hey, I've been there. I've been through that. We're going to get through this together. I got your 6, meaning, hey, if something happens, I will be there for you.
Yeah.
I will sit there. So that's what that means to me, is that that's why I started the nonprofit, is to go, all right, we need some money to do these things. And then we started the podcast, which is not funded by anything.
Not funded by the nonprofit,
Yeah,
not
everything's
funded
by
by
numbers.
anything. It's funded by us.
By our own
our
pockets.
salary.
Which is fine.
The
We don't-
money we take away
I
from
don't-
our family.
I don't think we're looking, you know,
Not
and
at
again,
all.
I don't
Not
think
at
we're
all.
looking for money at all.
We're
No
not
reason-
looking for a handout.
No, I'm looking to see if we can expand on getting a sponsor, just so we can say, you know what? How about $500 a month or a couple months or whatever, just to pay off the equipment that we're using, or like the programs we're using to edit the stuff, so we can do what we do without having to go broke just trying to start a podcast. You know, that's, or making T-shirts or coins.
So that's one of the things that we want to do.
You know-
What else do we want to do for the new year?
Well, we have a big list that's growing of people that volunteered that want to come on the podcast and share their stories. We want to be able to give those people something to remember us by, to honor them with the time that they gave us, like a challenge coin, like a T-shirt, like a hat, you know, whatever. If you're interested in coming on the podcast, hey, look, it's a really cool environment. We eat pizza, we have wings.
Yep.
I didn't have a
Bullshit.
Pepsi today,
We
but usually
fun.
have a Pepsi.
Yep.
We laugh, we joke, we put on TV, we take pictures.
Eventually, that's going to catch up to us.
Yeah.
The Pepsi.
Pizza,
See, the pizza,
the pizza, the wings.
pizza maybe, but I don't drink Pepsi, so
Hey, listen,
that helps
you know
me.
what? I don't think it's the worst thing that could happen to you, but
No.
all in all, I just think I'm very excited. You know, I'm very excited for the podcast. I'm really excited for the audience. I'm really excited for the people that we've touched from near and far. You know, we've messages from Arkansas, California, Miami, New York, whatever. And then our families. You know, I've gotten good feedback from your wife, from my wife, from our friends, saying, "Hey, what you guys are doing is awesome."
Yep.
You know, and I really didn't expect that. I just expected this to be a fun boys' night out. You know,
Yeah.
instead of going to the bar, we're recording a podcast. But instead, we're getting messages going, dude, you have no idea how I resonated with that message. So those are some of the things that we want to do. We want to see who we're going to utilize for some of this swag. We want to see if we can get any sponsors to give shout outs to their companies too, because that's what it is. You
And
know,
I think that's the big one with the sponsors. And that just helps us be able to, and like we said, use that money or use that profit to help those that are in need, things like that. It's you're also gonna be helping businesses, and it's growing everything together. Because again, this podcast isn't only for police and military. It's Joe Schmo the salesman. It's the mom at home. Right? It's the grandma going to do whatever. Everybody can relate to the things we're talking about. And what a sponsorship does is it takes that, and people will see a name associated with another Cosmetality podcast, and they're going to go, oh, well, what's that? Because I know the name of whatever business, what's the podcast? And that could turn around to that person and go, oh, shit, that makes sense. Or I had a very similar situation. I know somebody who's going through a very similar situation. And that's where, to me, these sponsorships really start to take off, because they're just going to help our voice reach that many more people, where right now the only way we really have that is by the thankfulness of the viewers and listeners who share our podcast, and hey, you should listen to these guys, you should give this a shout. You're gonna get that out tenfold. So the more people we can reach, hopefully the less people that are sitting in that chair next year or the year after that down the line,
Absolutely. You got anything you want to finish with, bro?
Give us your money.
So with that, we want to say thank you for a tremendous short 2024 as we just started this at the end of August.
Yeah.
I think it was our first episode.
I think it was phenomenal, though. Like, even in the short period of time that we did do the podcast in 2024.
24,000 views on the podcast so far. Over, we almost have 1,000 followers on TikTok with thousands of likes on Instagram. I think we're almost at 1,000 as well. Pretty
We're at
close
650
to
something. So
over half. Yeah.
Definitely. For when we started to where we're at in such a short time, the outreach has been phenomenal, and we appreciate everyone that has gave us a like, that has given us a listen, that has shared our podcast. I actually had somebody tell me, hey, I shared this episode with my girlfriend because I wanted my girlfriend to hear what that individual was going through at that time. And my girlfriend was kind of going through the same situation. So those messages are very rewarding to us. That's the biggest reward. That's the biggest payment of any sponsorship. It's the fact that we reach so many people and what it has done in a positive way to others as along with us. It's actually been great to me to be able to share stories with people and to be able to sit here with my brothers and listen to other people. Right. Yeah. So I think what we set out to do again, we've done so far, and we just want to expand on having more outreach. And that's where those sponsors come into play, helping us reach more the masses. My personal goal for this podcast, I would love to have, let's say, somebody in Florida, a few police departments in Florida, have at least one person from each police department in Florida come on this podcast and share one of their stories. Same thing with Texas. Same thing with, let's say, Ohio.
Right.
Same
having
thing.
That outreach.
Just having that outreach to where we're touching those individuals and they want to come on and share their stories. And again, this is not just for law enforcement, but we would love for more law enforcement to be able to speak about their experiences, and for veterans to be able to feel more comfortable speaking about their experiences.
Topics too. We want to hear the topics that you guys want to hear too, because we can always talk about the things that we deal with, but there's a lot of other stuff that people are dealing with out there. We've talked about health issues. We've talked about financial issues. We talked about mental health issues,
divorce.
These are things this podcast, I don't think
we've hit a plethora of topics.
Wasn't that 2024?
Of mental
I'm going to need you to learn a new word.
Words.
Hey,
I need you to find a synonym.
That's what I can come up with right now on the spot.
All right, we're gonna need a new word by next podcast. But yeah, just put it on the YouTube, put it on the Instagram, Facebook, whatever we have. Send emails. We just received a beautiful long email.
Yes, we did.
That we were really humbled to read.
Of a future, hopefully a future guest.
Yep. So get us some of your thoughts. What you want to hear us talk about, and let's see if we can make it happen.
Put us in contact with people as well. If you know people that would benefit from this and that would like to be on the podcast, we would love to hear that as well.
I think our closing statements, it's the start of 2025. The things we've dealt with, the things that you've had last year going into now, everyone says it's a new year, new slate, and I think that's the way, especially mental health wise, to look at that, is to go, okay, this is what I'm dealing with, whether it's at work, at home, personal. What is your perspective? Hard or not, what can you do to change it and make those changes? Because it's like we talked about, the people have reached out and have said, oh, I've changed to do this, I've started this. It's only going to help. And whatever you can do, reach out and help the person next to you.
2025, let's challenge people.
Talk about it.